So when you are evaluating a study to see how, if it's good information or not, you're going to come across observational studies. And remember, an observational measures are ones where an outside observer is watching the participants, the subjects of interest, and kind of analyzing and coding their behavior for the targeted behavior. So when you're evaluating these observational measures, you have to look at construct validity. Now, just a reminder, construct validity is the appropriateness of measurement decisions. So how well the construct has been operationalized into the research setting. So when you are looking at observational research, you are systematically recording behavior through observation, and this can be a really great method of inquiry, because when you are doing self-report measures, as in surveys and polls, people sometimes, believe it or not, don't tell the truth. Whether that's intentional or not intentional, sometimes people are not always honest or accurate about their thoughts and behaviors and their experiences. So observational research, when you have somebody watch participants, can be a really great way to sort of bypass the potentially non-truthfulness of your participants. And it's not that people are like specifically lying to you, researchers, all the time. It's more of that people don't know what they think. So remember the article from last week where it was like students' perceptions of learning like is not like associated with their actual learning, because cognitive fluency is a metacognitive cue for learning. And so when information is fluid, people assume they know it better, even though they actually don't. So this is one way that these non-conscious processes and cues that we have in our mind might mislead participants. So, they might not be able to tell the truth just because they don't, are not necessarily aware of all of the cognitive processes that we are aware of as psychologists. So, so that's one of the pros, is you can sidestep that non-truthfulness. Some of the cons of observational research is that when you have people watching other people, weird things happen. So one of the cons is observer bias. And this is when observers' expectations influence their interpretation of behaviors or the study outcome. So if you are, watching, if you're the research assistant who's coding for the behavior, you might be biased too. Lots of human biases, as we know in psychology. So if this is the case, then you're going to want to maybe have research assistants or the people who are observing not know what the purpose of the study is, and B, not know what levels of treatment the participants are receiving, or so I actually did this in my graduate work, as I had two observers rating sarcastic behavior, and that not only increased the reliability of the construct, because two people were identifying sarcastic behaviors for this outside observer measure, but it also kind of helped get rid of some of the bias. Not all of it, because people can have similar biases. So sometimes it doesn't matter how many observers you have, you're just going to get a whole lot of biased data. You just have to be careful. One of the things that we did is we actually contrasted the observer data with the we had our participants actually code for their own sarcastic use. They watched their own conversation and like marked where they were using sarcasm, and they also marked where their partners were using sarcasm. So we had 3 variables that we were comparing. The first was outside observers, which 2 graders helped create that data. We had the person speaking, and we had the person speaking rating their partner, so rating themselves and their partner. And so that kind of, we were able to kind of compare the biases of the individuals who were in the conversation with people who were not in the conversation. So that's one thing you can do, is you can use both. And the second thing you can do is do a mass design where observers are unaware, or you can make them unaware of what treatment they're receiving. So we did that as well. As my research assistants didn't know when they were coding for sarcasm which group the participants had been in. So you can do that with observational frequency research, or with experimental causal research, but we'll talk more about causal research later. So the second problem that can occur when you are using observational measures and conducting observational research is observer effects. So this, the first one, observer bias, has to do with like biases within the observer. So if I'm the observer, the biases from here. Well, biases can also occur in other people when somebody's watching them, because have you ever changed your behavior when someone's watching you? Probably. It's a weird feeling when people are watching you. So, in observer effects, there's expectancy effects, because the observers change their behavior, and this is a process known as reactivity. And so that can definitely be a con to observational research, but there are a couple solutions. One is that observers can be unobtrusive. So basically this is like incognito psychological spy with a notebook. So if you're going to research, parental support at a soccer game, you gotta dress up as a soccer parent. If you're gonna, go to, study dancers, you should probably go to a dance studio dressed like a dancer, because otherwise, if you're like in your business suit or like a lab coat, like all the dancers are gonna be like, what's happening? And then they're gonna change their behavior. You could also be present until people get used to you. So this happens a lot, especially in, like observations in classrooms when people are studying, developmental psychology or school psychology. They will come and observe a classroom for long periods of time. And so what they will do is first they'll just come for a few days, just sit in the back and just wait for the participants to get used to them. And so the observer effects will start, but when they actually start collecting data is after a couple times of being present, observing the participants, and then the observer effects are reduced. And finally, if you are trying to get, reduce the impact of observer effects, you can measure the results of behaviors instead of the behaviors themselves. So this example read in your book was an excellent one for it's relevant because it was, instead of, if you're interested in measuring the alcohol consumption of people in your neighborhood, you could ask them about their alcohol consumption, but they might lie to you because they don't want you to know how much they're drinking, especially during COVID. I'm just saying, we're all adults here, it happens. And so instead, what you could do is you could go into people's recycling bins and, count how many alcohol bottles are in their trash. And that'll give you a pretty good idea of how much they're drinking, because it's the direct result of that behavior. So a lot of observational research is done in this way, especially in cognition and cognitive studies. It's, you can't really measure cognitive fluency and cognitive processing speeds, but you can measure the byproduct, which is like how fast you make a decision or how fast your reactions are. So reaction time research is a behavioral measure. All right, so when you're in, just to recap, when you are interrogating construct validity, the appropriateness of the operationalization of your constructs. In observational research, you have to take into account is there observer bias present, and are there observer effects present, and how are the researchers mitigating that?